Welcome to Miss Scarlett. Subscribe and don't miss out on Patreon. Have fun! In the quiet stillness of dawn, an obtrusive noise erupted, shattering the tranquility. Fingers, still half asleep, fumbled in the dark, searching for the snooze button to quiet the relentless ringing. As Rhett opened his eyes, strands of his fiery red hair fell into his face, framing his drowsy expression. The soft glow of dawn bathed his bedroom, signifying the arrival of a significant moment, both eagerly awaited and greatly feared. Unbeknownst to most, a secret ritual had been unfolding over the past seasons. Precision-timed deliveries had become a regular occurrence, each bringing a carefully curated collection of garments, accessories, and beauty products, meticulously gathered over time. He'd squirreled them away in a locked chest in the back of his closet, waiting for the courage to finally use them. Now, that day had come. Rhett took a deep breath, steadying his nerves. He wasn't Rhett today. Today, she was Elia. Elia padded to the bathroom, her heart racing with anticipation. She opened her makeup bag, laying out the items she'd practiced with in secret. Foundation, concealer, eyeshadow, mascara, lipstick. Each item a step towards transformation. With trembling hands, she began to apply the makeup. The routine was unfamiliar, yet exciting. She'd watched countless tutorials, practicing late at night when she was sure no one would disturb her. Now, as she carefully blended the foundation, she felt a sense of rightness settling over her. The eyeshadow was trickier. Elia cursed softly as she smudged the line, quickly grabbing a cotton swab to fix the mistake. But, as she continued, her hands grew steadier, more confident. The face staring back at her from the mirror began to change, softening, becoming more feminine with each careful brushstroke. Finally, she applied the lipstick, a subtle pink that complemented her fair skin. Elia stepped back, examining her handiwork. The transformation wasn't perfect, but it was her. For the first time, she saw herself as she truly felt inside. Next came the clothing. Elia opened the closet, pushing past the suits and dress shirts that belonged to Rhett. At the back, hidden behind everything else, was the chest containing her true wardrobe. She pulled out a cream-colored blouse, running her fingers over the silky material. The navy blue pencil skirt came next, followed by sheer stockings and a pair of modest heels. Elia laid everything out on the bed, taking a moment to appreciate the ensemble. Slipping out of her pajamas, Elia began to dress. The stockings came first, rolling them carefully up her legs. The sensation was foreign but pleasant, the material smooth against her skin. She stepped into the skirt, zipping it up and adjusting the fit. The blouse followed, its soft fabric a stark contrast to the stiff dress shirts she was used to. Elia stood in front of the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing herself. The woman staring back at her was poised, professional, and undeniably feminine. She smoothed her auburn hair, grateful that she'd let it grow out over the past few months. It now fell just past her shoulders, framing her face softly. A glance at the clock told her it was time to start her workday. Elia took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. She worked remotely, which had made this day possible. No need to face coworkers in person, but there would be video calls to navigate. She settled at her desk, powering up her computer. As it hummed to life, Elia found herself fidgeting with her skirt, smoothing imaginary wrinkles. The first hour passed uneventfully, answering emails and reviewing documents. But then came the moment of truth. a video call with her team. Elia's finger hovered over the join meeting button. This was it. There was no turning back now. She clicked, and suddenly her face appeared on the screen alongside her colleagues. "Good morning, everyone," she said, her voice higher and softer than usual. She'd been practicing her feminine voice for weeks, but using it in a professional setting was nerve-wracking. There was a moment of silence, and Elia's heart nearly stopped. Then, to her immense relief, the meeting continued, as if nothing was out of the ordinary. Her co-workers addressed her as Elia, using feminine pronouns without missing a beat. She'd sent out an email the night before, explaining her transition, but the easy acceptance still caught her by surprise. As the meeting progressed, Elia found herself relaxing. She contributed to the discussion, her confidence growing with each passing minute. The feeling of silk stockings against her legs and the gentle pressure of the heels on her feet became a constant reminder of her true self. By lunchtime, Elia was riding high on a wave of euphoria. She'd navigated several calls, handled a minor crisis with a client, and even received a compliment on her blouse from a female colleague. The day was going better than she could have ever imagined. She decided to treat herself to lunch from her favorite cafe. Ordinarily, she would have simply ordered delivery, but today felt special. Elia grabbed her purse, a sleek professional bag she'd carefully selected, and headed out. The short walk to the cafe was both exhilarating and terrifying. Each step in her heels felt like a victory, but she couldn't shake the fear that someone would see through her, would somehow know that she wasn't born female. But as she walked, head held high, she realized that people barely gave her a second glance. She was just another woman going about her day. At the cafe, Elia placed her order with a smile, her voice steady and feminine. The barista chatted with her casually as she prepared her sandwich and latte. It was a simple interaction, but to Elia, it felt monumental. She was being seen and treated as herself for the first time in public. Back at home, Elia settled in for the afternoon's work. She found herself more productive than usual, buoyed by the morning's successes. The constant awareness of her feminine attire kept a smile on her face as she tackled reports and spreadsheets. As the workday wound down, Elia stretched, feeling the satisfying pull of muscles after sitting for hours. She realized with a start that she'd almost forgotten about her clothing. The skirt and blouse, the stockings and heels, they had become a natural part of her, not a costume or a disguise. With work finished, Elia faced a new dilemma. She wasn't ready for the day to end, wasn't ready to go back to being Rhett. She decided to take a walk in the nearby park to extend her time as her true self just a little longer. The evening air was cool against her skin as she strolled along the park's winding paths. Families were out, enjoying the last of the day's warmth. Dogs frolicked on the grass, and joggers passed by in a blur of motion. Elia breathed deeply, savoring the moment. She found a bench overlooking a small pond and sat down, carefully smoothing her skirt. The setting sun painted the water in shades of gold and pink, a beautiful end to a transformative day. Elia closed her eyes, listening to the gentle lapping of water and the distant laughter of children. When she opened them again, she noticed an older woman had sat down on the other end of the bench. The woman smiled warmly at her. "Lovely evening, isn't it?" she said. Elia nodded, returning the smile. "It really is. I don't often get the chance to enjoy it like this." They fell into an easy conversation, chatting about the weather, the park's recent renovations, and the antics of a particularly energetic golden retriever playing fetch nearby. It was the kind of casual interaction Elia had always shied away from as Rhett, but now found surprisingly enjoyable. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Elia bid farewell to her new acquaintance and began the walk home. Her feet were starting to ache from the unaccustomed heels, but she relished even that discomfort. It was a badge of honor, proof of the day she'd lived as her authentic self. Back in her apartment, Elia kicked off her heels with a sigh of relief. She padded to the kitchen in her stockinged feet, the hardwood cool beneath her soles. Opening the fridge, she pondered what to make for dinner. Cooking had always been a passion of hers, but tonight it felt different. She wasn't just nourishing her body, she was caring for herself, for Elia. She decided on a light pasta dish, something simple yet elegant. As she moved around the kitchen, chopping vegetables and stirring the sauce, Elia found herself humming softly. The sound of her own voice, still pitched in its feminine range, brought a smile to her face. Dinner was a solitary affair, but far from lonely. Elia savored each bite, reflecting on the day's events. She'd faced her fears, stepped out into the world as her true self, and found acceptance. It wasn't just the external validation that mattered, though that had been incredibly affirming. What truly resonated was the internal sense of rightness, of finally being comfortable in her own skin. After dinner, Elia settled onto the couch with a book she'd been meaning to read for weeks. The silky fabric of her blouse whispered against her skin as she curled up, tucking her feet beneath her. She found herself more engrossed in the story than usual, as if seeing the world through Elia's eyes allowed her to connect with the characters in a new way. As the clock ticked towards midnight, Elia reluctantly set the book aside. She had work again tomorrow, and while she longed to continue living as Elia, she knew she wasn't ready to make the transition permanent just yet. This day had been a test, a glimpse into what her life could be. In the bathroom, Elia carefully removed her makeup, watching as the face in the mirror slowly transformed back into the one the world knew as Rhett. But even without the cosmetics, even in the harsh bathroom light, she could see Elia shining through. She was always there, just beneath the surface. Changing out of her feminine clothes was the hardest part. Each item she removed felt like shedding a piece of herself. But as she folded the skirt and blouse, placing them carefully back in the chest, Elia made a promise to herself. This wouldn't be a one-time experiment. She would find more opportunities to be her true self, to let Elia out into the world. As she slipped into her pajamas, Elia, still Elia in her heart, even without the outward trappings, felt a profound sense of peace settle over her. She'd taken a monumental step today, one that would shape the course of her future. The path ahead wasn't clear, and she knew there would be challenges to face. But for the first time, she felt truly hopeful about what lay ahead. Crawling into bed, Elia hugged her pillow close. Her auburn hair splayed across the pillowcase, a reminder of the feminine beauty she'd embraced throughout the day. As sleep began to claim her, she held on to the memories of the day, the confidence she'd felt in her professional interactions, the simple joy of being addressed as she, the liberating feeling of moving through the world as her authentic self. Tomorrow, the world might see Rhett again. But inside, Elia knew she would carry this day with her always. It wasn't just an experiment or a fantasy anymore. It was a glimpse of her true life, the life she was meant to live. And as she drifted off to sleep, Elia smiled, knowing that this was just the beginning of her journey. The next morning dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through the gaps in the curtains. Elia stirred, slowly coming awake. For a moment, she was disoriented, the memories of the previous day flooding back in a rush. She sat up, pushing her auburn hair out of her face, and looked around the room. Everything was as she'd left it. Rhett's clothes laid out for the day, her own feminine attire safely tucked away in the chest. But something had fundamentally shifted. The world looked different through Elia's eyes, even without the makeup and clothing. As she went through her morning routine, Elia found herself moving differently. There was a grace to her movements that hadn't been there before, a consciousness of her body that felt new and exciting. Even as she dressed in Rhett's clothes, she held on to that feeling, that essence of Elia. At work, she found herself more engaged, more present. The confidence she'd discovered as Elia carried over, infusing her interactions with a new energy. Colleagues commented on her good mood, her increased productivity. If they noticed the lingering traces of nail polish she hadn't quite managed to remove, or the slightly softer pitch of her voice, they didn't mention it. Throughout the day, Elia's mind kept drifting back to her experience. She remembered the feel of silk against her skin, the click of heels on pavement, the liberating sensation of being seen as her true self. It wasn't just about the clothes or the makeup, she realized. It was about aligning her outer self with her inner truth. During her lunch break, Elia found herself researching support groups and resources for transgender individuals. The idea of transitioning permanently both thrilled and terrified her. But after yesterday's experience, she knew she couldn't simply ignore this part of herself anymore. As the workday wound down, Elia made a decision. She wouldn't rush into anything, but she would take steps to explore her identity further. She booked an appointment with a gender therapist, someone who could help her navigate the complex emotions and decisions ahead. That evening, as she stood in front of her closet, Elia hesitated. The chest containing her feminine clothes seemed to call to her. She knew she should probably give herself time to process yesterday's experience, to approach this journey with careful consideration, but the pull was too strong to resist. With trembling hands, she opened the chest. The cream blouse and navy skirt lay neatly folded on top, a visual reminder of the freedom she'd felt. Elia ran her fingers over the silky material, a smile tugging at her lips. She changed quickly, the familiar routine of donning stockings and adjusting her skirt already feeling natural. This time, she opted for a softer makeup look. Just a touch of mascara, a hint of blush, and a swipe of tinted lip balm. Her auburn hair she left loose, enjoying the way it framed her face. Elia didn't have any plans to go out. This was just for her, a private affirmation of her identity. She moved around her apartment, doing ordinary tasks, washing dishes, folding laundry, tidying up. But each action felt imbued with new meaning. This was Elia's life, Elia's home. As she settled onto the couch with a cup of tea, Elia pulled out her phone. She hesitated for a moment before opening the camera app. Taking a deep breath, she snapped a selfie. It wasn't a glamorous photo, just her, sitting on her couch, a soft smile on her face. But as she looked at the image, she felt a surge of emotion. The person in the photo was her, truly, authentically her. Not a disguise or a costume, but the real Elia, finally allowed to exist in the world. She saved the photo in a private folder, a memento of this moment. Then, feeling bold, she opened her social media app. Her finger hovered over the Create Post button. Was she ready for this? Ready to share this part of herself with the world? Elia took a deep breath, steadying herself. Then, with a surge of courage, she began to type. Friends, there's someone I'd like you to meet. Her name is Elia, and she's been a part of me for a very long time. I'm on a journey of self-discovery, and I hope you'll join me with open hearts and minds. She attached the selfie, her finger trembling slightly as it hovered over the post button. This was a big step, one that would change everything. But as she thought back to the peace and joy she'd felt yesterday, Elia knew it was the right choice. With a final deep breath, she pressed Post. The response was almost immediate. Notifications began to pop up. Likes, comments, messages of support. Elia read each one, tears welling up in her eyes. There were questions, of course, and a few confused responses, but overwhelmingly, the reaction was positive. Friends she hadn't spoken to in years reached out, offering words of encouragement. Coworkers sent messages of support, assuring her that she would be accepted at work whenever she was ready to transition there. Even a few family members, whom she'd been terrified of telling, responded with love and acceptance. As the evening wore on, Elia found herself engaged in countless conversations, answering questions, and expressing her gratitude for the outpouring of support. It was emotionally exhausting, but in the best possible way. Finally, as midnight approached, Elia put her phone down. She was emotionally drained, but filled with a sense of hope and possibility. The journey ahead would not be easy, she knew. There would be challenges, setbacks, and difficult conversations. But she also knew, with a certainty that filled her entire being, that she was on the right path. Elia stood, smoothing down her skirt one last time before heading to bed. As she changed into her pajamas, she didn't feel the same sense of loss she had the night before. Because now, she knew that Elia wasn't something she put on and took off. Elia was her all the time, regardless of what she wore or how she presented to the world. As she drifted off to sleep, Elia's mind was full of plans and possibilities. Tomorrow, she would call the HR department at work to discuss the process of transitioning in the workplace. She would research hormone therapy options and look into voice training. There was so much to do, so much to learn. But for now, in this moment, Elia was content. She was out in the world, accepted by those who mattered most to her. She was on the path to living as her authentic self, every day. Just before sleep claimed her, Elia whispered a quiet, "Thank you," to the universe, for the courage to take this step, for the support she'd received, and for the promise of a future where she could truly be herself. As the first light of dawn crept through the windows, Elia stirred, a smile already forming on her lips. Today was the first day of her new life, the first day she would face the world as her true self, not just in private, but openly and proudly. She rose from bed, her movements filled with a newfound grace and purpose. The mirror reflected back an image that was becoming more familiar, more her, with each passing day. Her auburn hair, slightly mussed from sleep, framed a face that was softer somehow, more aligned with how she felt inside. Elia took her time getting ready, savoring each step of her morning routine. She applied her makeup with care, each brush stroke an act of self-love and affirmation. The cream blouse and navy skirt, now comforting in their familiarity, slid on easily. As she slipped her feet into her heels, Elia felt a surge of confidence. She was ready. The walk to the office felt different today. Elia held her head high, meeting the eyes of passers-by with a quiet smile. Some looked curious, others smiled back, but most simply went about their day. She was just another woman heading to work, and that normalcy was thrilling. At the office entrance, Elia paused, taking a deep breath. She'd spoken with HR, and her team had been informed, but this was still a big step. With a final adjustment of her blouse, she pushed through the doors. The receptionist looked up, a warm smile spreading across her face. "Good morning, Elia," she said, her tone natural and welcoming. "Your new access card is ready."
"I'll just need you to sign here."
Elia felt a lump form in her throat as she signed. Her new name, there in black and white. Official. Real. As she made her way to her desk, colleagues stopped to greet her. There were a few double takes, some curious glances, but overwhelmingly, the response was positive. Handshakes turned into hugs, and more than one person told her how happy they were to finally meet the real her. Settling into her workspace, Elia booted up her computer. A new email address, a new nameplate on her desk. Small changes that represented so much more. As she began to work, she found herself more focused, more productive than ever before. The energy she'd previously spent hiding her true self was now free to be channeled into her work. Lunchtime brought a new challenge. The team usually ate together in the break room, a tradition Elia had always enjoyed. But would it be different now? She hesitated for a moment before gathering her courage and heading to join her colleagues. As she entered the room, the conversation paused briefly. Then, Sarah, one of the project managers, pulled out a chair. "Elia, come sit with us. We were just discussing the new client proposal." Just like that, she was part of the group again. The conversation flowed naturally, with her colleagues seamlessly using her new name and pronouns. There were a few questions about her journey, asked with genuine interest and care, but mostly it was business as usual. As the day progressed, Elia found herself relaxing more and more. She led a team meeting, her confidence growing as she realized her ideas and contributions were valued just as much as before, perhaps even more now that she was bringing her whole self to the table. There were a few awkward moments. A colleague who stumbled over pronouns, an old client who was momentarily confused during a video call. But each time, Elia handled the situation with grace and patience. This was a learning process for everyone, herself included. As the workday drew to a close, Elia's boss stopped by her desk.
"I'm proud of you, Elia,"
he said quietly.
"Your courage is inspiring, and I want you to know that your job here is secure. We value you, all of you."
Elia blinked back tears, managing a heartfelt "thank you" before her boss moved on. Packing up her things, Elia felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond completing her daily tasks. She had faced one of her biggest fears, being her true self in a professional setting, and had not only survived, but thrived. As she left the office, a group of her colleagues invited her out for drinks to celebrate. Elia hesitated only briefly before agreeing. This was part of her new life too. Social interactions as her authentic self. The bar was crowded, full of after-work patrons unwinding. As they found a table, Elia was acutely aware of the looks she was getting. But as the evening progressed, she realized most of those looks were simply appreciation. She was an attractive woman, confidently enjoying an evening out with friends. Conversations flowed, punctuated by laughter and the clinking of glasses. Elia found herself opening up more than she ever had as Rhett, sharing stories and jokes, her true personality shining through. Her colleagues responded in kind, and she felt the bonds of friendship deepening. As the night wound down, Elia said her goodbyes, accepting hugs and words of support from her friends. The walk home was peaceful, the cool night air a refreshing end to an emotionally charged day. In her apartment, Elia kicked off her heels with a contented sigh. She was tired, but it was a good kind of tired, the satisfaction of a day well lived. As she changed into comfortable loungewear, she realized she didn't feel the need to hold on to her feminine clothing like a lifeline anymore. They were simply her clothes now, an everyday part of her life. Settling onto her couch, Elia pulled out her phone. There were messages from family and friends, checking in on how her first day had gone. She responded to each one, feeling a warm glow of gratitude for the support system she had. As she was about to put her phone away, a new email notification popped up. It was from a local LGBTQ+ support group, responding to an inquiry she'd sent a few days ago. They were inviting her to their next meeting. Elia hesitated for a moment. She'd made so much progress, was feeling so good about her journey. Did she really need a support group? But as she thought about it, she realized that this wasn't just about getting support. It was about being part of a community, about potentially helping others who were earlier in their journeys. With a smile, she replied to the email, confirming her attendance at the next meeting. As she got ready for bed, Elia caught her reflection in the mirror. The person looking back at her was familiar now, not a stranger, not a disguise, but her true self. She smiled, running a hand through her auburn hair. Today had been a big step, but it was just the beginning. There would be more challenges ahead, more milestones to reach. But as she climbed into bed, Elia felt a deep sense of peace. She was on the right path, living authentically as herself. Whatever came next, she was ready to face it. As Elia, as herself, as the woman she had always been inside.
Thanks for watching, my girlies! Be sure to check out Patreon for more!